Hey, and welcome to Happy, Healthy, and Skeptical. We are your hosts, Christy Palermo and Jennifer Hobson. All right, Jen, today we are talking about motivation and inspiration versus inspiration. There's a lot of ways to look at this. So my question for you to start this out is, do you see motivation and inspiration to be similar and like of the same energy, or do you see them as two totally separate things?
I always want to just answer you and just say, no, that's it. Just no. And I think a lot of people, and even myself over time, those two words can be misconstrued, identified as one is identified as the other one, and they're confused. And we think motivation is inspiration, or we think we can't be motivated unless we're inspired, when really they're two totally different things. I would say they couldn't be more opposite. And the reason I say that is with the work that I've done personally around personal development and getting to where I am in my network marketing business, I think we talk about motivation a lot. If you are in a network marketing business, you have to be a self-starter. You have to be, because there's no boss, there's no clocking in. And this is even if you're any type of entrepreneur, to be completely honest. If you are a successful entrepreneur, it's because you're a self-starter. And a lot of people that I'll have this conversation and be like, oh, well, how do you stay so motivated? What motivates you? What motivates you? And nothing motivates me. You're not motivated, right, by doing work. Motivation is motive and action. So motivation is really just taking action and getting excited to continuously take action. And I think that's the biggest difference for me, is that's motivation. Motivation is rooted in taking action, where inspiration is, for me, really more of it's kind of a state of mind. It's a state of being, even. It's something that inspires you. And I don't want to use the actual word in the definition, but it's something that really gives you this idea or this thought to do a specific thing. So a lot of times I get inspired by a lot of the arts, right? I'm inspired by music, I'm inspired by dance, I'm inspired by drawing and painting and all of those things, and things that I see that other people do. Or I'm inspired by what someone else accomplishes, because I go, oh, I can do that too. I think that would be really awesome. And that's when they're really, really different. Inspiration happens as a thought bubble. That's kind of how I think about it. Motivation is I'm physically or actively creating a motion, whether the motion be forward in business, whether it be forward in fitness, whatever one of those things. Motivation has to be rooted in action, and inspiration is rooted in thought. That's where I think those two are completely different.
That is a great way to look at it. I never thought of either of those things in that way, but as you just broke it down that way, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I agree with you. And I think motivation, we hear a lot of times motivation is fleeting. So you and I, having created our own businesses, started our own business, again, I get the same kind of question, like, how do you stay motivated? But I'm not motivated. Most of the time, I'm not motivated. Like, I have to do the work and take the action. So I like that you're saying motivation is rooted in the physical action. And then inspiration, I tend to see it as like it comes from, yes, you can take it from outside sources when you see other works of art or something that resonates with you. But I see it too as something that comes from within. Like I can feel inspired, and I find that a lot of times I get to that inspirational point, but I have to, by making space for it. Like it does, like if I'm in a mindset, I guess, that is not the greatest, not so healthy, feeling down, those are the times that I'm almost never inspired, almost never creative. Even if it's just like, I don't feel creative to put up a story or a post on social media. But when I'm in a good headspace, that's when I'm coming up with things I want to share with people on social media, the games that I want to play with my kids. Oh, let's go here, let's go do that. Like, I find when I'm in a better mood, I'm feeling more inspired to create. from within and wanting to share and bring others into that inspiration, whatever it may be. And then sometimes it is actually creating art and choreographing. But I find it as much more as being within myself, where when it comes to motivation, I would not say the same at all.
Well, and I think a lot of people, we've just been using the word incorrectly. I don't want to say wrong, right? Incorrectly. It's this idea, and think about it. When's the last time you've listened to, we love Ed Milet, right? And he will really fire you up and you go, oh my God, I am so motivated. Well, you're actually wrong. You're not motivated, because unless you stop and then you go take action, then you were motivated. But if you're just excited, then you were inspired by what that person had to say. Inspiration, it kind of works like a spark, right? It gives you that burst of energy and you get so excited. That's great. Inspiration is only going to take you so far. And I think that's the biggest thing. Inspiration is only going to take you so far, where then you have to switch and go, I got to do the precursor to motivation, which is action. And then by the time you finish the action, not only were you inspired, but you were motivated to actually complete something. And I think that's the biggest thing. And if you think of inspiration, I literally think of it kind of like a sparkler, like a 4th of July sparkler. Once you light it, right, it's on fire. But unless you light another one, it goes all the way down to the end and it's done. There's no more sparkler. You have to keep lighting them. And I think that's the biggest thing is inspiration and motivation. They're only going to last as long as you work on them.
That's a great way to look at it. It's so beautiful, the sparkler.
Well, they all go out.
So what would you say what are some things that you find, well, you mentioned outside sources, but are there internal things that you do for yourself to find inspiration? Or making space for inspiration, I should say.
I don't know if it would be considered inside. I guess I'd have to see if I would define it. But, I try to continually make space, as you said, for inspiration. And that's a big part of it for me is reading. Reading is a big part. I'm inspired by other people's words. For me, it might be considered the inside. The journaling has always been a challenge for me. I'm always afraid, someone's going to find my super top secret journal. That's probably kind of boring. And, and then that's probably the only time where I'm like, oh my God, I care what other people think, because they're your deepest, darkest secrets. That always scared me to put that on paper. That is a work in progress for me. I do think that is a good one. And I do think taking the time to listen to other people's perspectives, right? How did other successful people achieve? So listening to podcasts. And I think sometimes I'll just draw with my oldest son, right? I love drawing, and until recently, you almost forget the things that you love that inspire you until you make the time for them. And if you go back to our conversation about scheduling and calendar and all those things, I actually had to make time to do that. And even I read a lot of personal development. I also had to make time to include nonfiction books into what I felt like I was missing that. So I think the biggest thing for inspiration, and sometimes I'll be inspired on a whim. You can't plan those. Those just happen, right? But you have to have your eyes open and available to capture those moments. So if you're too stressed out in life and you can't take a second, like the one that always inspires, like if I'm driving yesterday, I saw 3 different cardinals within a mile. I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's really awesome. And it gives you that little spark, a little bit more spark, right? And you look a little bit more for the things where you can see, where you get inspired. So I think you got to make the time. You got to be open to other people's perspective, what they can inspire you with. You got to be looking for the things that bring you joy, and you got to read. You got to read. I don't know how many times I can say it, but you have to be willing to read, because you can't just stop. Because with the stop of inspiration comes the stop of action, comes the stop of motivation, and your sparkler went out. That's what happens.
I know, and we don't want that to go out.
No. I was going to ask you, because I feel like you really connect to the internal driven inspiration. So what are the things that you do? Because I feel like I'm very external and you're very internal on the inspiration thought.
Well, actually, I was agreeing with what you were saying, where it's journaling and reading because it gets my mindset in a good place. And journaling gets just the extra white noise out. And just a little side cap, because we talk about journaling so much, a lot of people who are new to journaling or say it's really a challenge, they're like, what do you write about? So just a little thing, like these are just things that come to my head, like when I'm writing, when I'm journaling. One is I'm literally just writing. I don't know what to write because it's just getting yourself writing in the act of writing, and then something will come from there. But at least it gets you writing. Two, I start, if I'm feeling really grumpy, I start with just gratitude to put myself in a better mood. So I'll just start thinking, the universe, I feel like I'm writing to someone. That's my method. Each person is so different, but I feel like I'm like writing to my higher source. I believe in God. That's my person that I'm writing to, but it could be the universe, it could be to yourself, it could be to, I don't know, like pick something, whatever, however you feel like you want to write into things. So I do a lot of gratitude at the beginning, and then I kind of do like a question and answer for myself. If I'm trying to work through some problems, I'll be like, well, what about this? And then I'll kind of just see what comes out of that, and I'll answer myself. And that helps me work through problems or something. I'm like, I kind of want to do this. Like, do I? And then I kind of take inventory of how I'm personally feeling. Like if something makes my chest tighten, then I feel like that's like not the path that I want to go. But if I feel lighter and excited, then I'm like, oh, okay, there's something here. Let's go in that direction. So that's just some points I wanted to give on journaling, because I feel like some people avoid it because they don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden you have a page or two because you've just been working things out or giving your gratitude. So I say that because within that, that's where I find a lot of inspiration and a lot of energy. So that's where I say it's coming from within, but having to take the time for it. And I know there's a quote about it, but I'm not going to quote it right correctly because I don't know it off the top of my head. But I know it's that a creative mind is a mind that is looking or open to opportunity, kind of like what you were saying. Like you have
Yeah.
to be open to it, like noticing the birds, because then if you're in a different space, you're not going to notice them and be like, oh, that was actually really cool. When do I see it? Or when do I see those?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be open to the opportunity and be ready that you're like primed for it, if that makes sense.
No, I think that definitely does. And I always love when you mention gratitude because, as a reminder, you cannot be grateful and angry at the same time. It's not physically possible. You can try, you can prove me wrong, but you won't. Sorry. But I think there's one more step when you're talking inspiration and motivation. So when I'm inspired, or anyone's usually inspired, they have that spark, right? And they're excited and they want to do something. Usually you want to do something with that energy. Because if you don't do anything with the energy dies, right? So you're inspired. You are going to create your own wall if you haven't identified a specific goal or objective or even the action you need to take. And here's why. Because you have all of that inspiration, but if you don't know how to channel it, it's just going to fade away. So I think the biggest thing with inspiration is be open to inspiration, but you have to take the time. I think I've talked about this many times, is what are your goals? What are your objectives? What are the things you want to achieve? Because if you don't have them, the inspiration isn't going to do you any good if you don't know what the goal is and you haven't figured out, this is the action I need to take to achieve my goal. It's the precursor to success, and I think that's super important. So continue to be open to creativity, continue to be open to inspiration, but know what your short and long-term goals are, so when you are inspired, you can take action. And I can guarantee you, once you take the first step in the action that you know is going to get you to the next and get you to the next, that's where motivation shows up. You were inspired, you took the action motivated you because you achieved it to take the next action. And it's kind of this it's a little bit linear when you think about it. Inspiration is actually the first stop.
And if you don't know what those things are, what the end goal is or vision that you're working towards, journal on it. There we go. Back to
so maybe it's not so linear as it's circular.
Yes. And it's letting yourself dream big and envision where you want things to go. Or maybe it's a smaller goal, just whatever it is that you're working towards. But knowing that end goal, right, as Jen's saying, that's going to help you with the inspiration to then take the correct actions. So as we're wrapping this up, join in the conversation with us. And our top tips for this are to make the space for inspiration to then take the action to stay motivated or be motivated. So journaling, reading, making space for creativity and the things that you love, because it's in the places that we love that's our true passion within us. And that's what's going to create more of that same energy. So you have those passions for a reason. So follow them. If there's something that you used to love to do as a kid, you're never too old to do those things that you're passionate about. Like Jen's getting back to drawing. I have been dancing around the house a lot more and singing and making up silly songs with the kids because that's just fun for me. But if your thing is taking a walk in nature, but you don't do it anymore, make the time. Make the time, make the time, make the time. See, now I'm making up a new jingle.
Yeah, there's your new jingle. And I think if you're having a hard time making the time because you're not motivated yet, you don't wait for motivation. You have to be open to inspiration. And that's only going to happen if you take the time to do those things.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was the last point I would like to make too, is that right? Don't wait for motivation. That is so important because it's almost never going to be there. Like no matter, even if it's something you really, really, really want and it is your calling, you're most of the time not going to be motivated. I can't tell you how many days as a professional dancer and as a circus artist, I did not want to go to the studio. So many times because I just physically didn't want to. But as soon as I was there, it was part of my schedule. So I would, you just start taking the steps and I would get ready, get in the car, go there. And as soon as I would start moving my body, start doing the things that I knew I actually loved, then I was so glad I came, so glad I'm doing what I'm doing. But it's like we think too hard about things and we decide that we're not motivated to go. So we don't take the action, but just get yourself there, whatever the thing is, or sit down to write or whatever it is, or get in the kitchen and just try out recipes, whatever that thing is for you, because you're not always going to be motivated. If you think about it too much, you're never going to do it.
I know you said we were finishing up, but I love that you just shared the thing that you were successful at and you enjoyed, you didn't always want to do. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused. They get frustrated if they're not motivated, because if they're not motivated, that must mean they don't actually want it. They don't actually want that goal. They don't actually want to achieve that goal. They don't want to do that thing. If I'm not constantly and consistently motivated, it means I don't want it. And that's a bullshit story.
Yep, I absolutely agree with that.
That's it. That's all I have.
Well, thanks for joining us on another episode. You can find us on Instagram at Happy Healthy Skeptical.